from you, Winston, the lorry driver. I was saying earlier on, the weather's not too good here in London. Might have changed for the worse. Not in Derbyshire. Jim Simon, Winston, the lorry driver. It's beautiful here, and between 10 and 1, it's my favourite time of the day. Good to hear, Winston. Thank you so much. Later on, we're going to be heading to Poland. We'll talk boxing ahead of Dubois against Usyk. You made up your mind if you're going or not?
No, I'm going to stay here. The flight times are too much.
Okay.
6 o'clock in the morning, I don't fancy.
Quite right. Simon, I want to touch down on this. Southend United, I've met a number of fans of Southend United, and they always seem to me to be pretty perplexed, with good reason to an extent, because it's a proud football club, but these days plying its trade in the National League. Off the field, doesn't have its problems to seek, that is for sure. Been docked 10 points by the National League. It comes following a High Court decision yesterday to grant a final 42-day deadline to the club to avoid being wound up. Last month, Southend were given this adjournment at their previous appearance in court to clear their debt to HMRC and find a new owner. The current owner is Ron Martin. In court on Wednesday, the judge warned Martin that the club, founded in 1906, would be wound up if the new deadline of October 4th was missed. So they're up against it. October 4th seems to be D-Day in every sense. The judge said in court, if this wasn't a football club with the attachment of its fans, I'd be winding it up today. This has got to be sorted out. Ron Martin, the owner, joins us live. Ron, good morning. Are you going to sort it out?
Morning, Jim. Well, of course we want to. It was me that set the deadline for 42 days, 6 weeks, to allow the sale to go through. I don't know whether it'll be sorted out by then, but we'll continue to do all we can to make sure it is.
What's the situation? Am I right in thinking that you've got an unnamed Australian buyer, and that if this individual comes in,
I'm not sure his name is not known. I thought it might be by now, but yes, he's Australian. He's also putting together a small consortium of 3 or 4 people, all of whom are known to either myself or Tom Lawrence, CEO. And we do have a second buyer. Similar terms, but certainly the person from Australia is more advanced than anybody else.
So are you in the final days of your own ownership?
I hope so, Jim. I'd like to have sold it when I put it on the market in March. I really wanted the sale to go through before the season started, so the new buyer could put his mark on players and budgets and things like that, but I'm still here. For some ridiculous reason, some fans think I don't want to sell, which is utter nonsense. My life changed probably in COVID period, and I made that decision many months ago, but didn't announce it until March.
I mean, it's a big question, and probably it would take too long to answer it in the time we've got, Ron. But how's it come to this?
You mean the where we are in the league?
The financial predicament you're in, where you're at in the league.
I don't think it's so complicated, actually, Jim. I think that during COVID, we had quite debt to HMRC. We tripped up twice on a time-to-pay agreement, and therefore triggered the debt was like 1.9 million. When we tripped up and failed on the time-to-pay, it was about 1.46 actually. And they wouldn't reinstate it. Had they done that over maybe 18 months, we perhaps could have got through that, but they wouldn't. So at that time, I raised and put 2.2 million in. That was only on the 27th of February. So that discharged the debt, brought staff and players up to date. And the additional sort of 600,000 capital we thought might see us through to a sale. It did not. And then we had further debts accruing to that we had to discharge to maintain our licence. That was 239,000. And then I put a further 240,000 into the club and to pay for salaries and see it through. But it's not a bottomless pit. I can't keep doing that, and it's difficult. But if you ask us how we got to that, I think that my choice of managers during that COVID period and post, looking back, and Simon, you'll understand this only too well. I think I made errors. I think I probably took my eye off the ball. I didn't do as much due diligence on the individuals as perhaps I should. And we failed on the pitch, bringing back Phil Brown. Phil was very successful with us, but maybe he was out of the game too long and some of his recruitment.
See, Ron, some of the observations, I mean, I've walked in your shoes, so I understand a lot of what you say, and I always understood the principles of how difficult HMRC can be, because they are intransigent. They'd actually rather not get paid and have it cleared off their desk than do a commercial deal that gives people time to pay. So I do understand that. But you and I have had this conversation before, and these don't seem to be huge quantums of money. If you're in a situation now where these buyers fall through, where does that leave the club? Because when I bump into Southend fans, and I know football fans the same way that you do, when things aren't going right, they'll blame somebody. But the constant theme is that you've been holding out for certain transactions, there's land value in this deal for you, and that you are the reasons why this club can't be sold because of your expectation of what you can get out of a deal.
Rubbish. Absolute rubbish, Simon. It's just complete, utter nonsense. We had a deal with a company called Chimera. They were we agreed heads of terms with them. Lawyers were instructed. They were straight up front, said that they wanted to replicate the Wrexham model and make a documentary. They had Ray Winston and also The Rock. They told us in a frame to be heading it up. I'm not sure Rock was ever there, but Ray Winston appeared to be. And when he pulled out, because he was conflicted, because he's got an interest in a football agency, the deal fell apart. They didn't actually say that to us. They said they're still interested, but if there's anybody else that you've been talking to, we don't think we're going to get there by the adjourned court date, this was July, then you should speak to them. But it's got nothing to do with property. We're happy to let people stay at Roots Hall rent-free for 3 years, buy the club for £1. But I think what's putting people off is the current debt, and also, much more importantly, the cost of running the club going forward. But it's nothing to do with property.
But you're in that position now, whatever the reasons are, and we are. When we take on the running of a football club, when I ran Crystal Palace towards the end, it was costing me millions a month. And ultimately, in the middle of a banking crisis, my ability to be able to resource revenue became more difficult. But in this instance, Ron, the quantums are very different. I accept that everyone's pocketbook is different. But you're now in a situation where in 42 days' time, you've got a judge making a ridiculous observation that if it wasn't a football club, he'd wind it up, because I'm sure the creditors that want it wound up wouldn't be particularly pleased to hear that, because a football club is a business like any other entity. But if you can't close a deal in 42 days' time, do you perceive the club to be wound up, or are you going to be able to bridge the gap and get HMRC off your back?
I think the judge had empathy with the club. I think he was making the point that this is our third adjournment. If you look back at other clubs, they've had many more adjournments than that. But we have made progress during those times. Creditors have been their bills have been reduced. We paid 80,000 on Monday to HMRC. So the time that we got to court, their bill started off at 325,000, now down to 170. So it's becoming more manageable. But the club will not have the resource to discharge it by the 6 weeks. I will have to find additional money if I was going to save the club, and I don't know whether I can do that. There's not a bottomless pit. I know you found that, and I don't think it was a case of us finding additional resource. It's actually borrowing, isn't it? Because that's finite within a football club. You get so much revenue, and you can predict fairly accurately throughout the year what it's like to be within tolerance.
Why have you chosen, Ron, not that I ever advocate this route, but why have you not chosen to go into administration, seek creditor protection, find a deal? Because I know that it disadvantages the people that may well be wanting to gain some capital out of a sale, but it would have got you the same protections. You've got 10-point penalties. You've got all the challenges that ultimately administration brings. Why wouldn't you have taken that route? It would have made the buying of the business probably slightly easier, because everyone would have been squeezed down, specifically the revenue.
Certainly, no, the revenue won't be squeezed down under administration. They're preferential creditors. All staff and preferential creditors at HMRC will be paid in full. We could do that. We have a debenture. We could appoint an administrator, but we're trying to save.
Well, that's my point, though, Ron. You have a debenture which protects your position.
And it would ultimately protect the club's position too.
Well, yeah, but do you have a debenture? You have a debenture on the money that you've put in the football club, so you're protecting your economic position.
No, we won't get anything back. I can.
So then, why are you bringing a debenture into the equation? Just to be able to crowd down creditors?
No, because I need a debenture to be able to appoint an administrator. That's the reason for it.
I think, Ron, if we can sorry to use the phrase, if we can wind up this conversation, what would your message be to Southend United fans who are listening? Because they are perplexed, and they have been for a while.
Well, look, football fans do get perplexed. They bring things into the equation have no relevance. It was said yesterday to me by a person who I actually really trust. He emails me quite regularly, and I've always been upfront and 100% honest with him. And I said to him that you're suggesting that we've just spent £1 million on buying a piece of land. We haven't. I mean, that was July 22. It was a year ago. It's got nothing to do with anything raising funds for the club now. I've spent 2.7 million since the 27th of February in trying to save the club. My message is that I do want to save the club. I do want to sell it. I've got other things to do in my life, and not least of all my family. I want to move on. I'm not just an owner of the football club. I'm an effing fan as well, and I've been supporting this club home and away for 24 years, every single weekend. And in fact, Simon, you and I have met, haven't we, on some of those trips? I'm sorry, I've got someone else trying to get through to me. I'll leave that.
Understood, Ron. Understood, but so much hinges, Ron, in this deal that you're going to do with the Australian if you can get it done.
Or the other person that's there as well, but certainly the Australian who we get on really well with, we want to go through. He was delighted we got through the court hearing. There's one other thing, that we don't believe that the National League has the ability to deduct 10 points. We think it's contrary to the rules. We've got to appeal that. There's nothing in the rule books to sanction 10-point deduction.
Okay.
Not paying HMRC would embargo us. We accept that, but making payment as a condition of a license is ultra vires, and we're going to appeal it now. Today.
Okay, but Ron, just to put the record straight, and I think I've got it right. Having done it for so long, you're not prepared to fund the club any longer.
I didn't say that, Jim. I've been funding it. If I have it, I'll fund it. If I haven't got it, I can't do it. Understood.
Ron Martin, thanks so much for joining us live in the show. The Southend United chairman, Ron Martin. Quite a number of Southend fans trying to come on with bits and pieces of opinion following that. So we'll take a brief look in a second at that.